cruelty. I know it's been, we're coming to the end of our time. This moment I'm including, the story I'm going to tell you is my experience Wednesday night and Thursday morning. And I'm including it because I think it's something that I experienced so viscerally and sticks with me. And I think is just one example of what I think Israelis are experiencing on a daily basis. And I can share with you just a small portion of that and give you an idea of what it might be like to live with this kind of fear. But Wednesday night, after the CJP mission ended and they all went back to the airport, I was staying for the next weekend through the end of Shabbat. And I went and checked into my hostel at the conservative yeshiva. And when I arrived to check in, actually, the person at the desk looked up and she was like, "Avital?" I was like, "How did you know it was me?" She was like, "Well, you're the only person staying here other than this bunch of Israeli school kids who are here on like a class trip." And just that alone was, like, oh, I'm the only person here, right? I forget that there are no other tourists right now. But it was incredibly loud because everybody else who was there were like 16 to 18-year-old Israelis, and they were having a giant party in the courtyard. And I got into my room, which was very beautiful, but loud and echoey because it had this giant arch, and I could hear everything. And I was just physically and emotionally exhausted from the week that I had had and just desperately wanted to sleep and try to process in some way and make sense of the experiences I had just had. And was so upset about how loud it was and just really having a hard time with that, and fell asleep just feeling very restless. But I did fall asleep, and I woke up early the next morning to what I thought was a nightmare. There were loud booms that sounded very similar to the explosions that we had heard on the border, very loud booms echoing through my room, and then men yelling in Arabic loudly. And I thought that I was having a nightmare based on all of the stories that people had shared with me in the past week of what had happened to them on October 7th, of explosions and men yelling in Arabic as they were coming into their homes. And then my door opened, and I heard the door open, and I realized that I was actually awake, and that there were actually two men yelling in Arabic coming into my room. And I've never felt terror like that before. I think just based on all of the stories I had heard of this exact scenario from October 7th, of people hiding in their safe rooms or being in their homes and people coming in to kill them. And I just have never felt visceral fear like that in my entire life. And it turns out they were just maintenance men who came in because I was the only one in the hotel and all the other Israeli kids had checked out, and they didn't realize that I was in the room, and they apologized profusely and they left right away. And the booms had been just, construction stuff going on in the hallway as they were doing maintenance. And, everything was fine, but I was shaking for probably an hour after, once I realized that I was actually awake and not living the worst nightmare that I had just heard everybody else had lived. And I think I share that with you just because I think that's what people are living with on a daily basis: this fear, this memory, this trauma, this terror. And I just got a small taste of it, and it's something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. I can only imagine for Israelis what they're going to live with for the rest of their lives after this event. We're coming to the end. Just around Jerusalem, I spent a beautiful Thursday and Friday, wandering around Jerusalem. I got to go to the Israel Museum. I spent a day in the Old City and just sort of recovering for myself from the extremely emotionally taxing few days I had just had. But also started noticing some things, in Jerusalem that I had not noticed as much in Tel Aviv. I went to the Shuk on Thursday night and it was almost empty. And those of you who have been to Machane Yehuda Shuk in Jerusalem on a Thursday evening know it's usually so crowded that you can feel other people's sweat as you walk by. It's disgusting. It's packed, and just really struck me how empty it was on a Thursday night, including the Arab Shuk. In the old city, almost all the stalls were closed. It was almost completely abandoned. It was almost a little bit eerie walking around in the closed shuk. And again, in Jerusalem, I think there were actually fewer posters and reminders of the hostages. A lot of those had been actually replaced at that point with elections posters, but there were still reminders in every corner, including this JNF building, which had these beautiful projections on it, full-scale projections on the building, just reminders of the war. And this was just a moment of joy that I happened to stumble upon while I was wandering through the old city. Play it for you. Maybe. I'll try to play it for you. I guess I won't play it for you, but it is just a unit of soldiers singing their hearts out and having a beautiful concert in the Cardo and really joyously celebrating each other and singing Am Yisrael Chai. And I'll end with this guy. Sending some peace signs and some kisses. And that pretty much wrapped up my week. I'm going to stop sharing. Come back. And I'm happy to stay on for a little while. I know that was a lot of me talking. I'm sick of my voice. I imagine you guys are. But I'm happy to, hear any thoughts, reflections, responses, questions that you may have about it.
I'm going to suggest that people share their affirmations of what you just shared with us, rather than questions or comments. I think there's time for that at another point. I'm very struck by how affected you are by what you witnessed and what you heard and saw and experienced. And I feel like we all should just let that sit in a way. But I do want to let you know that how much we appreciate. And so if people want to share words of appreciation or amplification of, I think you were very brave. I think what you did tonight is it's kind of amazing the way you could balance sharing kind of facts and your own feelings, which is very hard. You made yourself very vulnerable. And I, for one, really appreciate it. And I'm sure others would like to share similar kinds of words with you.
Thank you. I'll also share my email in the chat in case anybody does have further reflections or thoughts or questions beyond that. Feel free to get in touch with me. And my parents, they can also share my contact information.
Anybody else have any comments, or are we just all taking in? It's a lot to think about.
It's a
lot to think about. And I really appreciate what you've done here. And by the way, you're a really good photographer. Don't put yourself down. Those photographs were amazing. Some of them were really, heart-wrenching, and some of them were just incredibly beautiful. The picture of the flowers at the Nova Festival site, that should be a poster somewhere. It's just incredible, the idea of life coming back in a place where so much destruction happened. So I really appreciate what you've done. Thank you so much, Avital.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, everybody. It's great to be back in community with you.
Yes, wonderful. Now you can go get some rest.
Yeah. Take care of yourselves too. It's a lot to take in.
You too.
Thank you.